Everyone. Welcome to this month's Advocacy Talks. This month we will be talking to two board members of NCBI, Senator Martin Conway and Jerry Kerr. We will be discussing the importance of hearing voices of people who are blind and vision impaired on both internal and external committees. We will also be Martin and Jerry will also be talking about the challenges of their roles on these committees. We would ask you to, if you have any questions, to please submit them in the Q&A section, and we will get to them at the end or in between if we can. And also just to let you know that these advocacy talks are recorded and we will upload them on NCBI's YouTube page. I'm going to pass you over to June Tinsley now to introduce our two speakers. Thanks.
Thanks, Eva, and welcome everybody, and thanks for taking the time to join us today. I'm delighted to be joined by, as Eva says, Senator Martin Conway and Jerry Kerr, both of whom are very active in the work of NCBI and also active in external committees as well, which they will be talking about. It's very important to NCBI that we increase the representation of people who are blind and vision impaired on different committees, so it increases people's understanding of issues and ensure that there's greater provision of services and supports to meet their needs. I suppose I'll begin now by just introducing Jerry and ask anybody who is joined us to put themselves on mute just to ensure the best sound quality. So over to you, Jerry. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, June, and thanks for asking me, and delighted to be on the panel there with Martin. Just by way of introduction, first of all, to say June asked me, and I'm not sure how many attendees there are there, but I know many of you may have visual disabilities or on that journey where you may be losing your sight. And to say that we have a great advocacy team, I have to do the little lick-ass bit at the start, but I do genuinely mean it, because we have June, who's come from Bernardo's and is a terrific advocate. We have Liz from Belfast via Scotland, I think, to Wexford, who we are delighted to have as our engagement officer. And we have Aoife, who many of you will know. And then we have Jessica as well. I don't think Jessica's here today. So we have three people with visual impairments out of the four on the advocacy team, which for an old lad like me is absolutely encouraging to see people who have visual disabilities playing such a central part. And you can do the same through advocacy. Okay. Two things I just want to say to you. And Liz, please stop me whenever my 10 minutes is up, or else ask me a question. The first thing I want to just say to you is the role of advocacy and where it comes from and why you do it. Well, very briefly, 20 years ago, I lost my sight. I went through a very tough time. I suffered from anxiety, panic, depression. I went to counselling, NCBI, and fighting blindness. And part of my recovery was to go to support groups, which I've been going to now for 15 years. And in many ways, it has been my rock. But through those support groups, I learned very much that in order to heal yourself, you have to go a little beyond yourself and be aware of others. And really what I became aware of was, in some ways, how fortunate I had, how certain supports I had, like I had a home, I had a family, I had a pension, I had various things. And when you go to a support group, to me, you touch the real problems that real people with visual disabilities are experiencing. And it's very important to me to keep in touch with that, because they are the people that inspire me. They are the people who often are the most vulnerable, have the least supports, and are the most courageous. And in advocating for them, for yourself, in supporting them and yourself, it helps your healing and it helps make you a better person. So that's the first thing. That's really the principle to me of advocacy and where it all comes from. Now, the PPN, if I could just very briefly tell you the PPN. I got involved in the PPN 20 years ago when I first went blind and had to give up my job and various things. Became involved with NCBI. I had been involved already there. And the PPN came later on. And the PPN is a way of connecting ordinary people like yourself who are in voluntary organisations like NCBI, Fighting Blindness, and all the voluntary organisations in the country, connecting them to local government. Now, Martin will speak, no doubt, very eloquently, because he's worked very hard at a national level, and he will give you a lot of ways that he's made a difference and how you can make a difference at national level. But I'm just talking about the local level and how you can make a difference. The best example I can give you is the Dublin City PPN, which I'm involved in for about 8 years now. The Dublin City PPN has 700 organisations on it. They're all broken into 3 pillars. Environment, we have about, say, 40 environment groups, so people who are passionate about the environment and improving the environment. Then you have community, and they're all sorts of community groups. There'd be about 400 of them. And then there's social inclusion. Now, social inclusion is ourselves, everything from wheelchair to autism to post-polio to headway, brain injury, addiction, you name it. And there's literally thousands of people who are volunteering and giving up their time, and who, without them, our country wouldn't be as good a country as it is, and our lives wouldn't be as good. And the PPN is, in a way, to try to connect them and their organisations to the local authority. Now, you say to yourself, what do I want to be connected to the local authority? Sure, that's all bureaucracy, and it's just about people on social rents and different things like that. No, the local authority is huge, and the way you can affect it is huge. Now, through the PPN, you can become a member, and Liz is very interested in getting you all involved in that. You can become a member through NCBI, and you can advocate on a PPN. So the first level you can be is just become a member, and you can be sent all the bulletins, all the networking opportunities, any grants that might be available to your organisation, and a whole plethora of things that you could do just at that level. Now, if you want to go a step further, and if you have the time and inclination, you can become involved in groups. Now, the groups are called linkage groups, and they're all across all the important committees in the PPN, Public Participation Network. And for example, in Dublin City Council, there's a disability links group where all those disability groups I was telling you about can meet, and they can feed into all the important committees in Dublin City Council. Now, I hope I'm not getting too complicated now, but I can go on now if you like and talk about what the different committees are and how we can affect change there. But the way you do it is by becoming part of a linkage group and electing somebody to one of those. The PPN itself is what we call a flat structure. So it's very bottom up. So the ordinary person comes in twice a year. You get all 700 groups coming in twice a year to a plenary, and they tell the people on what's called the secretariat or the board whom they've elected and whom they can throw off and put someone else new on very quickly. And I'm just lucky enough to be on the secretariat for a number of years. They can tell them what they want them to do. So there's very robust debates about what should be done in housing, transport, planning, arts and culture, finance, the whole lot. So you can have those debates and you can have your voice brought across there at that level. Or else, as I say, you can go directly through a linkage group to the various committees. So I'll just briefly explain the committees to you and give you an overview of them, and then I'll stay quiet. By the way, I am speaking on a phone, so I don't know how many of you are there. And Liz said, or a number of people there said they couldn't see me because I'm on a phone. But I would just like to explain, if you can't see Martin Conway, he's a cross between George Clooney and Brad Pitt. And I'm something similar myself, you know, just in case you're wondering. Anyway, I'll go on now to the committees. The committees, say on Dublin City Council, the first one that you can get involved in is the arts, culture, sports, recreation. That's a great committee. We have one person on Dublin City Council who's involved in cyclist cinema on that. You may have heard of that, where blind people come together and they create their own plays, audio plays. You can get involved. The libraries are under that as well, and there's a huge amount going on, as you know, Borrow Books in the library, or our own Easy Reader and Bookshare from NCBI, which are brilliant. There's a lot of sports activities there, vision sports activities with people. So you can have a say and you can bring forward motions and you can bring forward change. There's a lot of money giving out all these sort of activities. So you can have a say there. Now, the second one is climate change. There's a huge amount, particularly young people now, interested in the future of our planet, and there's all sorts of plans in order to decrease our carbon footprint. And Martin, I'm sure, would know very much about that as well. You can get, if you wish to, involved in that. The next one is enterprise and economics. In enterprise, they particularly encourage a lot of people with disabilities to start off as sole traders or various things like that. They will bring you through, if you want to, whatever you want to do, if you have any ideas on that, if you want to in some way start yourself as a sideline, if you have any particular talent, any particular activity you want to be involved in, that whole area can be covered. The next area after that is finance, which is like an octopus, and the finance, which is millions, covers all the committees. The next area after is planning. So they have a development plan every 5 years, and within that are sheltered housing or housing, social housing, affordable housing, all that area which affects people with disabilities, and the plan that accessibility is built into all the housing. The next one after that is traffic and transport. This is a huge area for you, which you may well know about, where we're very worried now about cyclists and shared spaces and pedestrianisation and bus connects and accessibility to buses, trains, darts, all that area. So you have a direct input into all that area as well. Now, I think I've covered all the main, what they call Strategic Policy Areas Committee. There's two more that you may be interested. One is called the Joint Policing Committee. That means that's quite a hefty committee, and it's in every area. So there's police on it, there's TDs on it, and there's people from the PPN on it. And they basically discuss any antisocial behaviour, anything that comes under policing. They can have an input in that in their own local area. And the last group is called the LCDC. Now, not the ACDC. If you were old enough as me, you'd remember that group. But the LCDC is Local Community Development Committee. Now, the Local Community Development Committee has a very big budget a lot of the time. Their last tranche was 430,000, which they gave out to all these organisations. NCBI could be one of those organisations if they have an idea getting money there. They had eligible applications of 1.3 million. So any ideas for improving anything in the voluntary organisation you're involved in, you can bring to that. Now, I think that kind of sums it up, Aoife, the whole PPN. I know people, quite complicated it can be, but once you get involved in it, it can be quite simple. And apart from that, it's great socially because you can make friends and you can have a social outlet. I'd be lost without it. Same as with the support group that I've gone to now for the last 15 years. You make some great friends and deep friendships in it. So I advise you all, through June there and the team, Aoife and Jessica, and particularly Liz, because Liz would be the one particularly involved in this, to get involved, and I think you'll find it good for you. Thanks very much.
Absolutely, that's great, Jerry. And I that's great information you gave. And I was just wondering if you could touch very briefly before we head on to Martin, very briefly on you are on the Services Committee of NCBI. Could you tell us a little bit about that and why you're there and what you do there?
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm on the Services Committee of NCBI. I've just temporarily stood down for personal reasons for a while, but I've been on the Services Committee. The wonderful thing about the Services Committee is that all the main people, say June from Advocacy and Media, you have Kyron O'Mahony, who's from Technology, and you have JP, of course, there, and all the people there. And you get Aaron then from Policy, and you get Alan Bannock from National Services throughout the country. It brings together in one group all the various activities under the CEO that's happening. Now, Martin would be on the board and they would deal with further issues of board finance and group finance, and they'd look at the overall picture of the shops and all that. But we're just focused on services for people. And I think it's a great way to keep in touch with the people at the helm, and they're all very dedicated people. They do a great amount of work, but they need people who are blind, just like you 4 out of 5 people on this, 3 out of 4 people on this. They need people who are blind who are in touch with the practical issues that they come across. And just as I was saying, when I get involved in support groups, they keep me grounded. And in a way, the idea of having us on those committees is to keep them grounded, to make sure that they are in touch with what's needed. Now, as I say, they are terrific people doing a great job, but without our voice, they may not be able to do as good a job. So I'd encourage anybody interested in coming on the Services Committee to talk to June or talk to Aaron or whoever it is that they should talk to.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you so much, Jerry. And we might have some questions coming in. We might get to them a little bit later if your phone hangs on until then.
Sure.
If it's okay, we might go on to Senator Conway now. Martin, if you could tell us a little bit about your involvement in NCBI and on the board, and a little bit about yourself, Martin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aoife. And in the first instance, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to share a platform with Jerry, somebody I have enormous regard for. I think certainly his description of the cross between two beautiful film stars is a compliment that I don't really deserve, but I'll take it nonetheless. And, you know, just in terms of yourself, Aoife, it's great to share a platform with you as well. And a lot of the listeners tuned in wouldn't know, but Aoife worked in my office in Leinster House for a day a week, I think, for about a year. And we have become great friends. And I'm very proud of everything that Aoife does. She's just such a wonderful, amazing person. And for those of you who haven't met her, I've no doubt that she will meet her in due course. Just a bit about myself and my relationship with NCBI, if you like. I suppose, look, I was born visually impaired, less than 20% eyesight. I had congenital cataracts as a child, and I would have engaged a little bit with NCBI when I was going to school, just in terms of just getting supports, low vision aids and that type of thing. I went to school in County Clare in a town called Innistimon. It was integrated education. There was no SNAs or resource teachers or support teachers back then, so you were really relying on teachers to help you. And of course there was the visiting teacher for the vision impaired, who paid a visit to the school maybe once or twice a year. But I went on then to UCD, where I did a degree in politics, and I joined an organisation back then called Young Fine Gael, and I became politically active. And I had decided when I was in college that I actually wanted a career in active politics. So I stood in the 1999 local elections. I went very close to winning, but didn't win. So I had to wait then another 5 years to get an opportunity to stand for the local county council in Clare again. And as a person with a vision impairment, going into politics in rural Ireland, and particularly in a rural part of County Clare, was a challenge in itself, because like many of the people in this line, I don't drive, and you know, I have a struggle to recognise faces, which is something that it's a significant disadvantage in politics. But I was lucky enough that I did get the opportunity of being elected a county councillor in 2004, and I won a seat in North Clare. And for the 5 years that followed, I put my head down and I worked hard, because I felt that the one way that I can prove myself and improve the lot of people with sight loss is to actually prove that I can do the job, and do the job as effectively as any sighted colleague. And I did do that for 5 years. I worked very hard in terms of issues in County Clare, such as housing, planning, helping people get planning permission to build homes, environmental issues like you know, retaining and or getting at that time our blue flags for our beaches. You know, I did huge amounts of work in securing extra lifeguard supports in the Hinch Beach, and you know, the nitty-gritty things that you go to your local county councillor for. And you know, the issues may differ somewhat, but there are many common issues throughout the whole country, urban and rural. such as the environment, such as housing, such as community. So essentially then, after the 5 years, I was up for re-election in 2009, and I stood before the people of North Clare again, and I got a massive vote in top of the poll and bringing a running mate in. So what that said to me was that I was able to do the job as effectively as any of my colleagues, and that was proven in terms of the personal vote I got in the local elections. So disability didn't matter. It was an issue. It was part of me, but it didn't define me. And that then gave me the, I suppose, ambition and, if you like, the confidence in one sense, but the ambition clearly to go into national politics then and stand for the Seanad. And I stood for the Seanad in 2011. And as many of you will know, senators in Ireland, 46 senators are elected by county councillors. 43 senators are elected by county councillors. 11 are appointed by the Taoiseach, and the remaining 6 are elected by university graduates. So I was lucky enough that I was elected by county councillors and on my first attempt. So when I got into the Seanad then, I was asked by the then Taoiseach in Kilkenny would I represent Fine Gael and the government as it was then on issues to do with equality and disability, and I did that, and I was very happy to do it. And again, I adopted the same approach that I had in my period as a county councillor. I put my head down and I worked to prove that somebody like me with sight loss, given the opportunity, can do the job, the same as my sighted colleagues. And what has intrigued a lot of my colleagues and continues to intrigue them is that I speak in Seanad with no notes. I speak off the top of my head. And I have no notes because it's pointless, because I wouldn't be able to read them. So I speak ad lib, if you like, and I've done that since being elected. Now, I celebrated 10 years as a senator on the 29th of April of this year. So I've a decade done as a senator. So in 2013, then I got promoted from equality and disability to being the government spokesperson in justice, which is a very senior position. And I did, so basically what I did then was, as justice spokesperson for the government in the Seanad, I was responsible for introducing and ensuring the passage of all government justice related legislation. And there has been quite an amount of that. And that put me to the forefront of Seanad politics, if you like, and Seanad debates, and gave me massive experience in terms of legislation. Again, in 2016, then I went before the electorate again of the county councillors around the country, and more or less said, look for a renewed mandate, which I was very fortunate to get, and I continued as justice spokesperson from the 2016 to 2020 period in Seanad, and I went before the electorate for a third time last year, following on from the general election, and I was re-elected again. So that was my third successive election to Seanad. And after being elected for a third time, the Taoiseach then and the Fine Gael leader, Leo Varadkar, asked me would I take on the responsibility of being spokesperson on health, because we were in the midst of a pandemic and he wanted an experienced senator to deal with all the health legislation. And the most recent health legislation was the continuation of the emergency health powers that An Garda Síochána have to assist public health in the midst of a pandemic. So that's my political career. How did I engage with NCBI? Well, my engagement with NCBI was when I was a young child, and I really didn't have any engagement with NCBI until I got a telephone call from the previous CEO, Des Kenny, who was the CEO of the organisation for many years, and he asked to meet me for a cup of coffee, and I met Des, and Des spoke to me about the work that NCBI were doing and he invited me to go on the board. I think it was after I had shared my own personal story with Ryan Tubridy and the Late Late Show back in 2014, and I had quite a high profile then. Again, they wanted people with cyclists on the board of NCBI, and I said to Des, look, it is a big commitment, I'll think about it, and I did think about it for a week or two, and I agreed to go on the board. What does the group board do? Basically, the Secretariat and the CEO and the senior management team basically report to the board, the board is responsible for essentially the running of the organisation and making big policy decisions on behalf of the organisation. And it's quite a demanding role. We get board papers ahead of every meeting, and we have to have them studied. And particularly in the last 12 to 18 months, it's been very challenging because clearly shops were closed. The organisation was in a difficult situation financially, and that had to be steered. And basically, we are essentially a support to the senior management team and the staff that I think do an amazing job. Because my engagement with NCBI, I suppose, since I've gone on the board, and particularly during the pandemic, I have been involved in facilitating meetings with government ministers on various different issues, everything from higher education to health to finance, even to culture. And I see myself as a conduit between the organisation and government, and I'm in a very privileged position where I have access to, I suppose, the most influential people in the country, and I can get meetings set up for NCBI. So I see my role really on the board as somebody who can use my position to get the door opened for the senior management team to meet ministers when that is necessary in order to advance and promote and develop the interests of blind and visually impaired people throughout the country, and to ensure that their voices are heard at the very highest level politically. So that's, I suppose, a quick summation, Aoife. I hope I haven't bored people, but I'm very happy to answer anyone's questions if I can at all. And just finally to say that the work I do for NCBI is completely voluntary. I don't obviously get any salary for being on the board, and I don't claim any expenses. But I consider it a privilege to be able to do it, and I'm very happy to do it. And hopefully in a collaborative way, working with everybody, we are advancing the issues and the concerns and the challenges that visually impaired and blind people in this country face. And ultimately, hopefully, we're just making life a little bit easier and a little bit better, and making life a little bit more equal. And I suppose that's my mission, and certainly any way I can help anybody in that regard. And I know we're supposed to be talking about advocacy, and I probably have strayed a little bit, but anybody who wants to get involved in politics, yes, it's a difficult business. Yes, it's challenging, but I would absolutely say that it is rewarding, because you can use your privileged position to help people on an individual basis. And there's no better feeling than being able to help people and to actually improve people's lives. So I would encourage anybody, and there's many political parties out there, and there's none, and you don't even have to be a member of a political party, but do, if you feel that you'd like to become politically active, don't think about it, do it.
Brilliant. That's great. Thank you so much for that, Martin.
Thanks.
I know Liz there is monitoring the questions. Liz, are there any questions coming up for Martin or Jerry?
There are indeed, and I've had a couple sent in beforehand, Aoife. So thank you both gentlemen for that, some very insightful comments. One of the questions that came in beforehand to some people who couldn't be here was, how do you, when you're sitting on a board or a senior committee within an organisation like NCBI, how do you ensure that service users are consulted and engaged in the major decisions of that organisation? Either of you, gentlemen.
Now, does Jerry want to go ahead? Because I know there's issues with his phone, so he might like to take that one.
Oh, thanks, Martin. Yeah, really, I suppose, insofar as possible, all organisations should be bottom up. And I think what Liz is doing, and June and Aoife and Jessica, it's really through advocacy network that people's voices are heard and should be brought to the committee. Like one thing that was brought to the committee, just to give a simple example, was getting the VAT back on an iPhone. And that was something that we were able to push, and the senior management team were able to push, and Martin there was able to have some, as he said, conduit there, connection. So now it's taken as granted that you can get your VAT back on an iPhone. So it's probably just a simple thing, but on bigger issues such as transport, we'd have June there would have a position on anything that would come out, like shared space or cycle lanes or the new types of bus stops. So you can, through the consultative panel that is being, now it's growing now. And, you know, I remember a time in NCBI when there'd be just one person in charge of advocacy and that was it. Now we're lucky we have 4 and we're going to have a 5th. So I think that network throughout the country should develop, and being part of the PPN network should also develop so those voices are heard.
Thank you, Jerry. And what about you, Martin? Would you have any comments on service users?
I very much agree with Jerry. And I mean, look, when I took on the position of being a board member of NCBI, you know, I was asked to go on the board, I suppose, for 2 reasons. One, because I was the only elected national politician in the history of our country with a vision impairment. And unfortunately, I'm still the only elected representative in Ireland in our 100-year history with a vision impairment at national level, either in Dáil or Shannon. And I was asked to go on the board for that reason, and also because I was somebody with a vision impairment, I suppose, who had been successful in life in terms of a career on the front line of politics. But the one thing I did make clear is that I want to see people with eyesight difficulties and vision impairments front and centre of NCBI. And, you know, I think that I can do the same job that my 59 other colleagues are doing as effectively as any of them. And I would like to think that in the future there'll be plenty of people with eyesight difficulties and other disabilities as well as members of the Oireachtas. It's very sad actually to think that in this particular Oireachtas that I am the only one with any disability, any declared disability of any kind, either in Dáil or Shannon. And I think the last time there was somebody with a declared disability was a guy called Sean Connick. He was a wheelchair user from Wexford. He was elected up until 2011. So, I mean, I just want to see people with vision impairments reach their potential in whatever walk of life they choose to do that. And, like, I suppose it's everything that I do in my voluntary capacity as a board member is to improve the lives of people with vision impairments, and you know that is the reason that I'm on the board, and that is that's the first and last reason. There's no other reason, and you know I think that you know a successfully functioning NCBI is critical in terms of you know everything from making budget submissions. And like as Jerry gave a very good example there, is reclaiming the VAT on an iPhone, and all technology that people that is a necessity for people to do their job or to live. You know, they should be able to access that technology. So look, I mean, there's always room for improvement in terms of ensuring that people's voices are heard, and you know, we can never say that we've enough done or we've achieved enough. There's always room for improvement, and I certainly would be pushing the NCBI senior management team to always look at how they can do better. And certainly this advocacy discussion we're having today, it's the first time in my period on the board that I've been asked to participate in this. And I think Jerry is right when he said that there was maybe one person doing advocacy with a vision impairment. Like, we're in a situation now where most of the team involved in advocacy have their own personal experiences. And you know, I just look at IFA and how proud I am of IFA, and I've seen the contribution that IFA has made to this organisation, and it's immense. And I have absolutely no doubt that IFA herself has a phenomenally bright future in public affairs and advocacy. Like, she's achieved so much for somebody so young. And like, we need more IFAs, and we need to see lots more IFAs in our organisation. And I'm sure there are other IFAs that are working in the organisation. I just haven't met them. I just happen to know this IFA. And so, look, there's always room for improvement, and we can always do better.
And thank you, Martin. And on that subject, one of our listeners has said they would encourage the board to invest more in research in various areas of research related to vision impairment and blindness. They'd also like to see service users at the AGM, and to have more communication directly with service users directly from the board. So it certainly looks like there's a great appetite from people to hear what the board has to say, and to hear what things that you're involved in directly. There's also a comment here about service users. Let me have a read. But yes, about service users talking about the funding of frontline services and building on that in a greater capacity, community resource workers, to build up the army of people out there delivering frontline services. So that's some feedback for you on that regard. And one more question. There's another question here. I know it's, what do you think the chances are of getting universal basic income for visually impaired people who choose to work would be? I think that one's for you, Martin.
I don't know is the honest answer. I would absolutely, I think it's something that we should aspire to. I mean, you know, there is a living wage that is part of the programme for government, that where the government are committing that there will be a basic minimum standard of living that every working person should be able to achieve. Now, the cost of somebody having an eyesight difficulty and being visually impaired or blind, there is a cost associated with that in terms of going to work and associated costs. And certainly I think that a mechanism needs to be looked at to ensure that those costs don't negatively impact on somebody's income. So, you know, somebody's take-home pay should be the same as their non-visually impaired work colleague. And if it is a case that somebody's income is reduced by 15 or 20% simply because they're visually impaired and it's a cost, well, that's something that needs to be looked at, because then you're not really in an equal society. I mean, we had legislation in the Senate last week about the whole gender pay gap, and the fact that in Ireland, women who do the same work essentially as men are still 14% less better off. So essentially, on the 20th of November each year, women in this country cease to get paid until the end of the year, because they're 14% worse off. And we're passing legislation, and it was debated actually in the Shannon on Monday, where companies now of 250 employees or more will be obliged to publish their pay scales, and that it would be available publicly. And we were making the point that really it should be companies of 20 employees or more, because it's not really a major headache for administrative headache for companies to make that information available. And I made the point as well in terms of people with disabilities, and that needs to be looked at. So it is an ongoing discussion. I think for the next couple of years, things are going to be very difficult, because we're coming out of a global pandemic that has impacted on our country and our people very significantly. but it also has provided a lot of opportunities for people working remotely and so on. So it is an issue, and it's an issue that we have to keep highlighting. And hopefully at some stage we will see equality of pay and a decent minimum working living wage. And I think that would be driven by Europe as much as Ireland.
Oh, thank you, Martin. Just a message there for you, Jerry. Earlier, someone asked, are there any web links where we can join the linkage groups you were talking about? This person's very much interested in reading more. I've mentioned that the PPNs have their own website, and they could contact me, obviously, if they'd like to discuss further. I was wondering whether there's anything you'd like to add to that, Jerry.
Yeah, Liz, exactly. You know, it should be easy for people to join. I can talk to you about that later, Liz, and we could put up on, I don't know, on the website of NCBI, if you want the whole 31 email addresses of all the PPNs in the country, perhaps the way, but I can have a chat with you, or that particular caller could talk to you, and we could send information on for whatever PPN he wishes to join or she wishes to join. You know, so
that would be great. I'll get in contact with you next week on that, Jerry. I know there's a general I usually send out a link to the general PPN information from the government. It's a very long one and I couldn't copy it in there. I was trying to copy it in, which gives the handbook, the PPN handbook. But yes, I think maybe a little bit of a condensed version for people on that. So I might give you a call next week on that.
No problem, Liz.
That's all the questions here so far that I can see. Oh, just a quick one for you, Martin, on general politics. Wondering, how do you manage the hustle and bustle of the on the ground politics? This gentleman, anonymous, I might add, has always struggled when it comes to canvassing at doors because of the difficulty navigating steps, footpaths, and finding doorbells. So it could well be somebody that has a vision impairment.
Yeah, it can be quite entertaining, actually, having me canvassing on doors. Aoife would have experienced it with me in the last election. But like I very much just get on with that attitude, and I very much, you know, like where there's a will, there's a way, and where there's a barrier, I want to overcome it. And canvassing and the hustle and bustle and the frantic pace of politics, you know, it can be intimidating if you allow it to be. But like it also, if you don't allow it to be intimidating and you say I'm going to take it on, well, you just do. And I've never not spoken about my disability, even when I was a councillor. If I was asked to speak about it, I would. And that's when I went on the Late Show that time then, and I spoke to Ryan Tubridy about it. There was a huge awareness then of people that mightn't necessarily have been as aware up until then. So look, it's not easy. There's no point in saying political life is very, very difficult. It's difficult for everybody in politics, and it is difficult for somebody with a vision impairment because I can't just jump in the car and go to crisscross my constituency to public meetings. You know, I have to travel by public transport to Dublin, which, you know, doesn't give you the options of just being able to jump in a car and go up it at ease. I have an ambition, and that is that at some stage before I finish in public life, that these Google cars will be able to drive me to Dublin if it ever does advance to that level. And I've joked about that you know, it certainly would make life very easy. The recognizing people, being able to read a room, for example, and to read the tone and the mood of a room. And people in politics can do it by just looking at people's faces. You know, none of that's available to me, so I just have to go with my own gut instinct. And like in Ireland, in other countries, there's what they call the list system, where, you know, a party would just nominate people on a list that would become members of Parliament or members of the European Parliament. In Ireland, it's directly elected. It's the proportional representation, single transferable vote system. So, you know, like if you want to become a member of Dáil Éireann, you have to stand and people have to vote for you and you have to get elected. And, you know, it's a challenge. But like, look at again, where there's a will, there's a way, and if you're determined enough, you'll achieve it. And yes, every career has its downsides, and politics certainly does. But you know, it is worth it in the end.
Thank you, Martin. Just another question for you, actually. Is Martin aware of the inequalities between blind pension and disability allowance? There are quite a number of disparities that really put blind people at a disadvantage relative to people who have other disabilities. Could you please speak to that?
I am aware of it. I do believe that the whole idea of a blind pension needs to be reformed. I've spoken at length at senior government level about that. You know, why would anybody in their 20s, 30s have a pension? You know, it goes against all logic. It should be a payment, a disability payment, as opposed to a pension. And you know, it shouldn't result in people not being attracted to either go to college or go to work, or you know, the ambition of, you know, I think it's certainly something that does need significant reform. And you know, I think that reform has to be part of the post-pandemic conversation. And certainly if people have suggestions or ideas or international comparisons or examples that they want to send to me, they can do it through June and Aoife, no problem. I'd be very happy to look at any suggestions of how we can improve things, because I do believe that improvement is necessary.
Thank you, Martin. Gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our advocacy talks today, and you've both given very strong messages about people getting involved in different ways, and whether jumping into politics, jumping into PPNs. I'm wondering if you could summarize very briefly what would be your strongest message to people when it comes to whether they're living, particularly living with a vision impairment or blindness, about what areas, what strengths they can draw upon to inject themselves into the society as strongly as possible.
Well, in concluding, and thank you very much, this has been a great opportunity to reach out to people. I think they've already made the first most important decision, and that's by being on this call and by being part of the advocacy network. I would encourage people to engage with Aoife and June and yourself, Liz, and others in NCBI. And you know, if you have a particular interest, whether it's sport, culture, you know, if you're interested in transport policy, as Jerry has outlined in great detail earlier on, there's many ways you can get involved through SPCs, PPNs, you know, policing committees, and so on. And you know, all of these committees want people with disabilities to engage with them and be part of them. And so, you know, as I say, the first important step has already been made by being on this forum in the first place. But I would say reach out, you know, whatever area you're interested in. NCBI will steer you in the right direction, and will work with you to channel that energy and that focus in the right direction.
Thank you, Martin. And what about you, Jerry?
Yeah, I think Martin has summed it up there. You know, I don't know the individual person who has made that, who's asked that, and so I can't respond individually. That person may be at, like, to me, it's a journey, a sight loss journey. There's a lot of people who've gone before us. There's a lot of people willing to help. I suppose it sounds like a cliche, but please don't be isolated. Times can be very tough at times, but there are people to help. There is counselling, there is support groups, and as you become stronger and feel stronger, so your voice will become stronger, and you will be able to participate, to make a difference and to change other people's lives, just along the ways that we were talking about already.
That sounds wonderful. I'm going to pass back to Aoife now to summarise and close for the day.
Brilliant. Well, thanks for that, Jerry and Martin. That was brilliant. I'd just like to say to everyone who is listening, if anyone has any questions that they didn't get answered, or they think of something later, just email one of the advocacy team. You can email me. It's aoifewatson@ncbi.ie, and I'll get an answer from Jerry or Martin for you. Also, if anyone's interested in any of the PPN more information about that, email me also, or ring NCBI and ask for the advocacy team. You'll probably get through to me. And yeah, any other questions, this recording will be up on the YouTube channel, I hope tomorrow, so you can listen back then. And I will let you all go and have a lovely evening, and thanks again to everyone who took part.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now. Bye-bye.